In a desolate patch of Kentucky wilderness, where gnarled trees clung desperately to the earth and the wind whispered secrets through overgrown thickets, a discovery was made. It was the kind of discovery that sent shivers down the spine of a community, a moment pregnant with both sorrow and a fragile hope for answers long buried. For 23 agonizing years, the name Megan Carter had echoed through the quiet streets of Louisville, a tragic refrain in a song of unresolved mystery. Now, in this remote, forgotten corner, fragments of bone and tattered cloth hinted at a narrative about to unfold, one that would finally bring resolution to a cold case that had haunted a city for over 2 decades. The silence surrounding Megan's fate was about to be shattered, replaced by the stark, undeniable truth unearthed by patient hands. Megan Carter was, by all accounts, a shining example of youthful promise. A high school senior in Louisville, Kentucky, in 2002, she embodied the spirit of dedication and community service. Her infectious smile and unwavering commitment to helping others made her a beloved figure among her peers and teachers. Megan wasn't just another bright student, she was a force of nature, deeply involved in myriad school activities and local volunteer programs. Her weekends were often spent tutoring younger children at the community center, organizing charity drives, or volunteering at the local animal shelter. She possessed a quiet strength and a remarkable empathy, qualities that endeared her to everyone she met. Her family, a close-knit unit comprising her devoted parents, Sarah and Thomas, and her younger brother, Alex, adored her. They saw in Megan a future doctor, a humanitarian, someone destined to make a significant positive impact on the world. She had already received early acceptance to her dream university, and her future seemed limitless, brimming with possibility. The night of her disappearance, October 18, 2002, began like any other Friday evening. Megan was at a school fundraiser, an annual autumn carnival held in the gymnasium, tirelessly working her shift at the silent auction booth. She had been there since early afternoon, cheerfully encouraging bids and managing transactions, her enthusiasm never waning. Friends recalled seeing her bustling around, always with that characteristic bright smile, well into the evening. The event wound down around 9:30 p.m., and Megan, after helping with the final cleanup, began her short walk home. It was a route she had taken countless times, a familiar path that snaked through well-lit residential streets. The last confirmed sighting of Megan was by a fellow student, Mark Peterson, who saw her leaving the school parking lot, waving goodbye as he drove past around 10 p.m. She was alone, carrying her backpack, heading towards the tree-lined street that led to her house, just a few blocks away. When 10:30 p.m. arrived and Megan still hadn't walked through the front door, a subtle unease began to creep into the Carter household. Sarah tried Megan's cell phone, a basic flip phone common at the time, but it went straight to voicemail. Thomas, usually calm and composed, felt a prickle of alarm. This was entirely out of character for Megan, who was always punctual and meticulous about informing them of any delays. By 11 p.m., the unease had morphed into outright panic. Her parents called friends, scanned the neighborhood streets in their car, their hearts pounding with growing dread. The realization hit them with a sickening thud: something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. Their bright, dedicated daughter had simply vanished into the night, leaving behind nothing but a chilling emptiness and a profound, unanswered question. If you're drawn to true crime mysteries and the pursuit of justice, hit that subscribe button now and join our community. The immediate panic of the Carter family quickly escalated into a desperate search, culminating in a frantic call to the Louisville Metro Police Department shortly after midnight. Officers arrived at the Carter residence, their faces grim, recognizing the gravity of a missing teenager. A missing person report was filed, and Megan's disappearance was immediately classified as high priority due to the suspicious circumstances and her uncharacteristic absence. Detectives began their initial interviews with Sarah and Thomas, meticulously noting every detail, every last known contact, every possible lead, no matter how small. They scoured the immediate vicinity of the Carter home and Megan's presumed route from the school, flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness, but found nothing amiss, no discarded items, no signs of a struggle. The air hung heavy with unspoken fears, anxieties that police officers, unfortunately, knew all too well when a young person vanished without a trace. As the sun rose on Saturday morning, casting a pale, indifferent light over Louisville, news of Megan Carter's disappearance spread like wildfire through the community. Friends, classmates, teachers, and even strangers were galvanized into action. A massive community mobilization effort sprang up almost organically. Hundreds of volunteers, their faces etched with concern, converged at the local high school, transforming it into an impromptu command center. They organized into search parties, fanning out across parks, wooded areas, and residential neighborhoods, their calls of "Megan!" echoing through the crisp autumn air. Flyers bearing Megan's smiling image were printed by the thousands, plastered on every lamppost, storefront window, and bulletin board in the city. Social media, still in its relative infancy in 2002, was used to share information, desperately seeking any fragment of knowledge that could lead them to her. The outpouring of support was overwhelming, a testament to Megan's impact on those around her and the community's collective hope for her safe return. In the days and weeks that followed, the initial energy began to wane, slowly replaced by a gnawing frustration as promising leads inevitably turned into dead ends. Early theories abounded. Had Megan run away, perhaps overwhelmed by the pressures of college applications? Her parents vehemently denied this, painting a picture of a grounded, happy young woman with everything to live for. Was it an abduction? The thought sent shivers down everyone's spine, but there was no ransom note, no witness to a struggle. Could it have been an accident, perhaps a fall or a hidden injury that left her incapacitated somewhere unseen? Search teams revisited areas multiple times, expanding their radius, but found no trace. Detectives meticulously interviewed Megan's friends, her boyfriend, teachers, and even distant acquaintances, piecing together her life, looking for any hidden conflicts or secrets that might shed light on her vanishing. Each interview, each follow-up, each tip hotline call, produced only more questions, deeper uncertainties, until the frustration became a palpable, heavy presence in the Louisville Police Department. For Sarah and Thomas Carter, the passage of each day without Megan was an eternity of unbearable anguish. Their home, once filled with Megan's laughter and vibrant energy, became a mausoleum of silence and despair. Every phone call, every knock at the door, brought a flicker of hope, only to be extinguished by disappointment. Interviews with the media captured their raw desperation, their pleas for anyone with information to come forward, their tearful descriptions of their beloved daughter. Alex, Megan's younger brother, struggled with his own grief, confused and angry at the sudden, inexplicable void in his family. The family clung to memories, to photographs, to the faint scent of Megan's perfume on her untouched pillow, as the agonizing reality of her prolonged absence settled in, threatening to consume them entirely. Eventually, local and national news outlets picked up Megan's story, her face gracing countless television screens and newspaper front pages. The hope was that wider exposure would generate new leads, new eyes on the case that could unlock the mystery. For a time, the media amplified the search, bringing Megan's plight to a national audience. But as the weeks bled into months, and then into a year, without any concrete breakthroughs, the headlines became less frequent, the news segments shorter. The intense spotlight slowly dimmed, and Megan Carter's disappearance, like so many others, began its chilling descent into the realm of cold cases, a tragic story that lingered in the community's collective memory, but without an ending. The chilling descent into the realm of cold cases became Megan's grim reality. Her file, once bulging with fresh leads and excited tips, gradually thinned out, relegated to a back shelf in the police department's archives. The active investigation, with its round-the-clock shifts and daily press briefings, transitioned into a stalled inquiry, a routine review undertaken every few years by different detectives. Each time a new officer inherited the case, they would pore over the photocopied notes, the faded photographs, the interviews that had long since yielded no new information, hoping to spot something, anything, that had been overlooked. But the lack of new forensic evidence, the absence of any witness who could definitively place Megan after Mark Peterson's sighting, made progress impossible. The frustration was a constant, dull ache for law enforcement, a testament to the elusive nature of some crimes, particularly those where a person simply vanishes into thin air, leaving no obvious trace. It was the cold case, reality, a term that brought shivers to families and signified an ongoing, yet often stagnant, search for truth. Despite the relentless march of time and the official classification of her case as cold, Megan's family refused to surrender to despair. Their hope, though battered and bruised, remained an unyielding flame. Sarah and Thomas Carter continued their efforts with a quiet, fierce determination that defied logic. They maintained an intricate website dedicated to Megan, updating it with new pleas, digitally restoring old photographs, and ensuring Megan's face was never truly forgotten. Every autumn, around the anniversary of her disappearance, they organized remembrance events, small gatherings that kept Megan's memory alive and served as a poignant reminder to the community that her absence still echoed. They spoke at missing persons conferences, advocating for better resources and support for other families experiencing similar nightmares. Their unwavering commitment was a testament to a parent's love, a promise whispered across 2 decades that they would never, ever give up on finding answers, no matter how long it took. As the years silently accumulated, the world outside Louisville underwent significant changes, particularly in the realm of forensic science and technology. The early 2000s saw DNA analysis still in its relative infancy compared to what it would become. Techniques that were once considered cutting-edge evolved into standard practice, and entirely new methodologies emerged. Advanced genealogical DNA tracing, mitochondrial DNA sequencing, and sophisticated crime scene analysis tools that could extract microscopic traces of evidence from seemingly sterile environments became commonplace. These technological advancements, like dormant seeds waiting for the right conditions, were slowly but surely laying the groundwork for potential breakthroughs in cases like Megan's. The science was preparing for a day when yesterday's impossible might become tomorrow's undeniable truth, transforming how law enforcement approached even the most stubborn cold cases. Megan's disappearance, even as it faded from prominent headlines, left an indelible scar on the city of Louisville. It was a wound that healed superficially but never fully closed. Her name became synonymous with the tragic vulnerability of youth, a stark reminder that even in seemingly safe communities, darkness could lurk. Schools implemented stricter sign-out policies, neighborhood watch programs gained renewed vigor, and parents held their children a little tighter. Megan's story contributed to a heightened awareness about missing persons, fostering community discussions about child safety, the importance of knowing your surroundings, and the potential dangers lurking unseen. It was a somber legacy, shaping perceptions and igniting a collective resolve to prevent such a tragedy from ever happening again, even as her own fate remained a haunting enigma. 2 decades slowly unfurled, a quiet passage of time marked by birthdays uncelebrated, holidays devoid of her vibrant presence, and milestones Megan would never reach. Her name, once shouted in frantic searches, settled into a whispered legend, a tragic tale told to newcomers, a poignant memory for those who had known her. The oak trees around her school grew taller, seasons changed, and the world moved on, but in the heart of Louisville, Megan Carter remained a symbol of an unsolved mystery, a beautiful life stolen, leaving behind only questions and an aching silence. That silence, however, was about to be broken in the most unexpected and devastating way, proving that the passage of time, while it may cool a case, does not necessarily extinguish the truth. That silence, however, was about to be broken in the most unexpected and devastating way, proving that the passage of time, while it may cool a case, does not necessarily extinguish the truth. In the early spring of 2023, a phone call shattered the fragile peace that had settled over the Carter family. It wasn't a call they had hoped for, not truly, not anymore, but one that contained the first real peace of their daughter in over 2 decades. Far from the familiar streets of Louisville, deep within the rugged, undulating terrain of rural Kentucky, a new lead had unexpectedly emerged. A group of hikers, traversing an infrequently used trail, stumbled upon what appeared to be human remains. The location was remote, hidden by dense underbrush and a canopy of ancient trees, a place where secrets could easily lie undisturbed for decades. News of the discovery quickly reached state authorities, and given the age of the remains and the isolated nature of the site, it immediately sparked renewed interest in the myriad cold cases that plagued the Commonwealth. The moment the discovery was confirmed as human, a meticulous and intensive forensic investigation began. A team of highly skilled forensic anthropologists, archaeologists, and crime scene technicians descended upon the site, treating it with extreme care and precision. Every fragment, every soil sample, every piece of organic material was painstakingly documented, collected, and catalogued. The challenging nature of establishing identity after so many years, exposed to the elements, was immense. The remains were fragmented, scattered, and degraded, but the determination of the experts was unyielding. They utilized every tool at their disposal, from detailed comparative anatomy to advanced bone analysis, attempting to reconstruct a biological profile. Samples were carefully extracted for DNA testing, hope flickering in the stark scientific process. It was a race against time, not in the traditional sense, but against the inexorable decay of evidence, a profound commitment to giving a name back to the voiceless. Then, the heartbreaking news arrived, delivered with a somber gravity that resonated across the state. Through the marvels of advanced forensic techniques, specifically mitochondrial DNA analysis combined with dental records and skeletal reconstruction, the impossible had happened. The remains, discovered in that remote patch of Kentucky wilderness, were positively identified as those of Megan Carter. The confirmation came like a punch to the gut for her family, a wave of profound sorrow mixed with an unsettling sense of validation. Megan was found. Their beautiful, vibrant daughter, who had vanished so abruptly, was no longer a ghost in the missing persons database. She was tangible, real, albeit in the most tragic form imaginable. The call from the lead detective, a voice heavy with empathy and regret, brought an end to 23 years of agonizing uncertainty, replacing it with the stark, undeniable truth of her death. With the identification of Megan Carter's remains, the case immediately shifted from a missing persons cold file to an active, high-priority homicide investigation. The reclassification was swift and decisive. What had once been a desperate search for a vanished girl now became a relentless hunt for a killer. Law enforcement agencies, including the Louisville Metro Police Department and the Kentucky State Police, formed a joint task force, their resolve hardened by the gravity of the discovery and the sheer passage of time. Detectives, many of whom were not even on the force when Megan disappeared, pored over the original case files, now imbued with a chilling new context. Every interview, every police report, every single piece of information from 2002 was re-examined, not through the lens of a missing person, but through the grim reality of a murder. The determination to find Megan's killer after 23 years was palpable, a promise whispered by every officer involved that justice, though delayed, would not be denied. The public reaction to the discovery was a complex tapestry of emotions. A profound sense of somber relief washed over the Louisville community, mixed with a deep, aching sorrow. There was a collective sigh that Megan, at long last, had been found, that her family finally had an answer, however devastating. But this relief was quickly overshadowed by a surge of anger and outrage. The fact that her life had been taken, that she had been discarded in such a remote place, sparked a renewed fury. 23 years later, the raw emotion was still there, bubbling to the surface. Social media exploded with tributes to Megan, and calls for justice echoed through local news channels. Candlelight vigils were spontaneously organized, drawing crowds of both those who remembered Megan personally and a younger generation who had only known her as a name in an unsolved mystery. The community mourned, but they also demanded accountability, a collective plea for the truth to fully emerge and for the perpetrator to finally face the consequences of their heinous act. The detectives, now armed with the devastating certainty of Megan's fate, immediately initiated the grueling process of reopening the investigation with a new, sharper focus. The dusty original case files, some yellowed with age, were pulled from storage and meticulously laid out across tables in a dedicated task force room. Every witness statement, every tip, no matter how obscure or dismissed in 2002, was re-examined through the grim lens of a homicide. They weren't just looking for a missing girl anymore, they were searching for a killer. The initial police reports, detailed accounts of Megan's last known movements, and the frantic early hours of the search, were scrutinized for any overlooked inconsistencies or subtle clues that might have taken on new meaning now that the outcome was known. Every name mentioned, every casual acquaintance, every fleeting interaction recorded 2 decades ago was now subjected to intense scrutiny, searching for any connection, any motive, any indication of who might have harbored ill will towards the bright, innocent teenager. One of the most powerful tools in this renewed investigation was the harnessing of modern forensics on the old evidence. While many physical items from the original 2002 investigation had been meticulously preserved, their true potential had been limited by the technology of the time. Now, fibers previously dismissed as ubiquitous could be analyzed for trace DNA. Microscopic skin cells, invisible to the naked eye, could potentially yield a genetic profile. Digital traces, though primitive by today's standards, were meticulously reviewed. Old computer hard drives, if any existed, were forensically imaged, and even old cell phone records, which in 2002 might have only shown call logs, were re-examined for cell tower pings that could offer more precise location data. The clothes Megan was believed to have been wearing, if any fragments were recovered with her remains, would undergo advanced testing, looking for accelerants, foreign soils, or microscopic elements that could link her to a specific location or assailant. Old vehicles suspected of being near the school that night, if still extant, might be re-inspected with new chemical sprays that could reveal latent blood or other bodily fluids. It was during this painstaking re-evaluation of every minute detail from the original case that a new person of interest began to emerge from the periphery. This individual, who had been a peripheral figure in the initial investigation, perhaps interviewed briefly or mentioned in passing by one of Megan's friends, suddenly came under intense scrutiny. Perhaps a reread of an old interview revealed a subtle shift in their story, a detail that didn't quite line up under the harsh light of new information. Perhaps a cross-reference with other unrelated cold cases from the region, now possible through advanced data analytics, flagged a pattern. Or it could have been a new witness, someone who, years later, felt compelled to come forward after hearing of Megan's discovery, finally unburdening themselves of information they had kept secret, perhaps out of fear or misplaced loyalty, for over 2 decades. There was a name, a face, a narrative that began to crystallize around this individual, drawing them into the center of the unfolding tragedy. Building the case was a painstaking, deliberate process, like assembling an elaborate jigsaw puzzle with many missing or damaged pieces. Detectives worked tirelessly, piecing together old dots with new information, painstakingly constructing a timeline that now included Megan's last moments and the subsequent disposal of her body. They conducted fresh interviews, approaching old witnesses with new questions, their memories perhaps jogged by the recent news, or by the persistent yet gentle questioning of seasoned cold case investigators. The potential motive, long a murky unknown, began to take shape, informed by newly uncovered relationships, past conflicts, or even seemingly insignificant interactions that, in retrospect, carried sinister undertones. Every alibi offered in 2002 was re-verified, every claim fact-checked against a wealth of new data and forensic capabilities. The meticulous reconstruction was critical. After 23 years, the prosecution would need an airtight narrative to convince a jury. The pressure on the Joint Task Force was immense and palpable. The community, still reeling from the tragic confirmation of Megan's death, watched with bated breath, demanding answers and justice. News outlets, having covered the initial disappearance, and now Megan's discovery, were relentless in their pursuit of updates. Megan's family, having endured 2 decades of agonizing uncertainty, now faced the harrowing reality of a murder investigation, their hope for accountability a fierce, burning desire. Law enforcement knew that after so long, the window for justice often narrowed. They felt the urgency to bring Megan's killer to account, to finally provide the Carters with the resolution and peace they had been denied for 23 long, excruciating years. The clock was ticking, not just for the legal process, but for the collective healing of a community still scarred by a teenager's vanished promise. That clock was ticking, and then, in an instant, it stopped. The news broke with the force of a seismic event, rippling through Louisville and beyond. An arrest had been made in the Megan Carter murder case. The announcement, delivered by a solemn police chief flanked by stoic detectives, sent shockwaves through the community, eliciting gasps of disbelief and a collective, almost audible, intake of breath. For 23 years, Megan's killer had walked free, hidden in plain sight, and now, finally, the net had closed. The surprise was profound, especially because the arrested individual was not some shadowy stranger from outside the community, but someone whose name resonated with many who had followed the case, a figure who had been present, though largely overlooked, in the periphery of Megan's life in 2002. The suspect's name was David Miller. He was 45 years old, a seemingly innocuous individual with a quiet life in a neighboring town, just a short drive from Louisville. In 2002, Miller had been a 22-year-old handyman who occasionally did odd jobs for Megan's high school, often staying late after events like the fundraiser Megan attended. His connection to Megan, at the time, appeared minimal, almost non-existent beyond casual encounters on school grounds. He wasn't a classmate, not a close friend, not even an acquaintance her family knew well. He was simply a face, one of many adults who moved through the bustling environment of a high school campus. His background revealed no prior violent criminal history, just a few minor infractions as a younger man, largely unrelated to the severity of the crime he was now accused of committing. He was married, had a child, and presented as an average, unassuming citizen, a fact that only amplified the community's shock and horror. The community's reaction was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Relief, deep and undeniable, washed over many, a sense of justice finally dawning after decades of darkness. But this was inextricably intertwined with a simmering anger and profound disbelief. "David Miller? Him?" was a common refrain, spoken with incredulity. How could someone so seemingly ordinary be responsible for such a heinous act? Megan's parents, Sarah and Thomas, appeared before cameras, their faces etched with a familiar grief now laced with a raw, fierce anger. Sarah spoke of being numb, while Thomas simply stated, "We have waited a long time for this day." Friends of Megan, now adults with families of their own, expressed a mixture of sorrow for what Megan lost and a burning desire for retribution. Social media platforms buzzed with discussions, theories, and outpouring of emotions, as Louisville grappled with the reality that a monster had walked among them, undetected, for so long. Following his arrest, David Miller was formally charged with the murder of Megan Carter. The initial legal steps moved swiftly. He was arraigned, appearing in court with a blank, almost bewildered expression, entering a plea of not guilty. Preliminary hearings were scheduled, and a public defender was appointed, signaling the beginning of what promised to be a long and arduous legal battle. The prosecution, spearheaded by the state attorney general's office, immediately began the process of building their case, confident in the new evidence that had led to the arrest. They spoke vaguely of new forensic breakthroughs and re-evaluated evidence from the original crime scene, hinting at a meticulously constructed narrative that would soon be unveiled in court. In the vacuum created by the initial lack of detailed information from law enforcement, speculation and rumors flourished. Everyone had a theory. Some whispered about a chance encounter, a random act of violence. Others posited a deeper, hidden connection between Miller and Megan, a secret known only to them. Media analysts dissected Miller's past, looking for any clue, any hint that might explain the horror. How had he evaded detection for so long? What was the moment, the piece of evidence, that finally brought him down? The public discussion was a complex tapestry of outrage, morbid curiosity, and a desperate need to understand how such a prolonged deception could have been maintained. The truth, however, remained tightly guarded, set to be meticulously unraveled in the hallowed halls of justice, piece by agonizing piece, explaining how a young life was extinguished and how its killer remained hidden for more than 2 decades. The truth, however, remained tightly guarded, set to be meticulously unraveled in the hallowed halls of justice, piece by agonizing piece, explaining how a young life was extinguished and how its killer remained hidden for more than 2 decades. As the legal proceedings against David Miller commenced, the tightly guarded secrets began to unspool, slowly, agonizingly, revealing the chilling details of Megan Carter's final hours and the motive behind her brutal murder. The prosecutor, in a solemn opening statement, painted a grim picture, detailing how new forensic evidence, particularly advanced DNA analysis from a small, overlooked blood spatter found on a piece of equipment in the school's janitorial closet, directly linked Miller to the scene. This tiny, almost invisible trace, meticulously preserved from 2002, had finally yielded a match to Miller, whose DNA had since been entered into a national database following a minor assault conviction in 2011. It was the linchpin, the undeniable scientific proof that broke the case wide open. The why behind the crime, the motive that had eluded investigators for so long, began to emerge, not as a grand, premeditated scheme, but as a horrifying consequence of opportunity and a sick, twisted sense of entitlement. According to the prosecution's narrative, David Miller, then a young, disgruntled handyman, harbored resentment towards the privileged students at the high school where he worked. He reportedly felt overlooked and disrespected, viewing the fundraiser as another example of their easy lives. He had stayed late that night, supposedly to clean up, but had instead been drinking secretly. He saw Megan leaving, alone, and the combination of alcohol, bitterness, and the quiet, empty school corridor proved a deadly cocktail. It was not a random act by a stranger, but a crime of opportunity by someone who knew the school's layout, someone who could blend into the background, someone who saw Megan not as a person, but as an object of his simmering rage and dark impulses. The narrative of Megan's final moments, pieced together from forensic evidence and Miller's partial confession, was agonizingly reconstructed for the jury. Megan, walking through the dimly lit service hallway on her way out, was confronted by Miller. The prosecution suggested he made an unwanted advance, which Megan, in her characteristic strength, firmly rejected. This rejection, coupled with his inebriated state and underlying resentment, ignited his rage. There was a struggle, brutally brief but violent, in that forgotten hallway. Megan fought bravely, leaving behind the small speck of blood that would, 2 decades later, become her voice for justice. Miller, in a panic, overwhelmed her, likely silencing her with his hands to prevent her screams from being heard in the empty school. He then hurriedly loaded her unconscious or deceased body into his work van, driving her to the remote location he knew well from hunting trips, hiding her remains under the cover of darkness. It was a cold, calculated act to conceal his crime, transforming a moment of uncontrolled fury into a deliberate cover-up. The long road to justice, however, was fraught with challenges in prosecuting a cold case of this magnitude. Defense attorneys immediately seized upon the passage of time, arguing that memories had faded, witnesses were unreliable, and evidence could have been contaminated over 2 decades. They questioned the chain of custody for the DNA sample, suggesting possibilities of cross-contamination or misidentification. They highlighted Miller's lack of a violent criminal record at the time of Megan's disappearance, attempting to portray him as an unlikely perpetrator. The defense's strategy was to sow doubt, to argue that while Megan's death was tragic, the evidence against Miller, after so many years, was circumstantial and insufficient for a conviction. They claimed his partial confession was coerced, and that he was merely a convenient scapegoat for a case the police were desperate to solve. The courtroom became a battleground of scientific expertise versus legal skepticism, with Megan's memory hanging precariously in the balance. For Sarah and Thomas Carter, sitting in the courtroom day after day, listening to the horrific details of their daughter's last moments, was an ordeal beyond words. Each piece of testimony, each photograph presented, each scientific explanation, forced them to relive the nightmare they had tried for so long to compartmentalize. Sarah often clutched Thomas's hand, her face a mask of quiet agony, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks as the cold, scientific language described the indignities inflicted upon their beloved Megan. Thomas, usually the stronger of the two, stared ahead, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on David Miller, searching for some sign of remorse, some flicker of humanity, but finding none. The emotional impact of the trial was a secondary trauma, a necessary evil in their pursuit of justice, forcing them to endure unimaginable pain to ensure Megan's story was finally told, and her killer held accountable. The hope for closure warred with the raw, fresh grief that surged with every gruesome detail, making an already unbearable situation even more profoundly tragic. The hope for closure warred with the raw, fresh grief that surged with every gruesome detail, making an already unbearable situation even more profoundly tragic. Yet, through this gauntlet of pain, the judicial process lumbered onward, culminating in a verdict that, for Megan's family, delivered a profound, if bittersweet, measure of finality. After weeks of intense testimony, harrowing forensic presentations, and impassioned arguments from both sides, the jury returned, their faces grim but resolute. David Miller was found guilty of the murder of Megan Carter. The courtroom, which had often been filled with hushed gasps and stifled sobs, erupted in a collective, relieved exhalation. Sarah and Thomas Carter held each other tightly, tears streaming freely, a quarter-century of suppressed anguish finally finding a release. The sentencing followed a few weeks later, with the judge imposing the maximum penalty allowable by law, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. There would be no early release, no second chance for the man who had stolen Megan's future. This verdict, 2 decades and 3 years in the making, brought a resolution that had once seemed utterly impossible. For Megan's family, it meant that the question mark that had hung over their lives, a cruel void consuming every thought, every milestone, had finally been replaced by a definitive answer. It was not the answer they had desperately prayed for in 2002, Megan's safe return, but it was the truth, and with it, the perpetrator was held accountable. The community, too, felt a palpable sense of closure. The long-standing shadow cast by Megan's disappearance finally began to lift, replaced by the grim satisfaction that justice, though agonizingly slow, had ultimately prevailed. Yet the question lingered, was justice fully served? For the Carters, no sentence could ever truly compensate for the vibrant life stolen, the dreams shattered, the irreplaceable presence of their daughter. But it was a form of justice, a recognition of Megan's humanity and the monstrous crime committed against her. In the quiet aftermath of the trial, reflection turned to Megan herself. Her life, though tragically cut short, was remembered not just for its ending, but for its incandescent beginning and the impact she had made. Her parents spoke of her boundless energy, her compassionate spirit, and her unwavering determination to make a difference. The enduring pain of her loss remained, a permanent scar on their hearts, but it was now coupled with the knowledge that her story had been fully told, her voice finally heard through the evidence and the verdict. Her memory, once shrouded in the mystery of her disappearance, was now clearer, honored by the pursuit of truth. Her case became a beacon of hope for other families grappling with cold cases, a testament to the idea that perseverance, combined with evolving forensic science, can indeed yield answers, even after unimaginable lengths of time. This case serves as a stark reminder of the profound human impact of violence. One senseless act, committed in a moment of darkness, rippled through generations, shattering a family, traumatizing a community, and leaving an indelible mark on everyone connected to Megan Carter. The Carters' lives were irrevocably altered, marked by an enduring void that would never quite be filled. But in the final resolution, in seeing Miller held accountable, there was a different kind of peace. It wasn't the peace of forgetting, or even truly moving on, but the peace of knowing. The truth, however brutal, offered a foundation upon which a new, albeit scarred, normal could begin to be built. Megan's name would forever be etched in history not just as a victim, but as a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of a family's love, and a powerful reminder that some stories, no matter how cold, eventually find their ending. What are your thoughts on this long-awaited resolution? Share them in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, please like this video, and for more deep dives into complex cases, make sure you're subscribed. Click here to watch our next video.